Welcome to another episode of People Uncorked. Matt Same sharing stories with you one glass at a time. Today's guest is Tom Goslowski. We'll be calling him Goz for the entire episode. Tom is a Syracuse native, played football, basketball, and baseball at Solvay High School.
Hey.
If you're from Central New York, you get that joke. He went on to play football at Hobart College. He was an academic All-American, which is very hard to believe. Went on to do radio work for the Geneva Red Wings, the Syracuse Salt Cats, and the AAA Syracuse Mets. I think they were the Nationals back then, or the Nationals organization. He worked as a post-game show host for Syracuse football and Syracuse basketball. He's covered 4 Super Bowls, the NCAA men's basketball tournament, the NBA and NHL draft, the Travers Stakes, as well as numerous UFC and boxing pay-per-view events. He's currently the program director for WGY in Albany, New York, and he's one half of Levack Goz of Fox Sports Radio in our beloved capital region of New York. I bring you Tom Goslowski.
What an intro. Thank you very much. That was very good.
How'd I do?
Very good.
All right.
We could have gone longer if you wanted, but I'm just kidding. Thank you for having me. This is awesome. I appreciate you thinking about me for this.
Goz is a Gemini, and he likes walks on the beach. We won't get into all that. So you've worked in Syracuse, and you've worked in Albany.
Yes.
So what are, as far as sports markets are concerned, what are some of the similarities and what are some of the differences?
So for Syracuse, it's easy on a Monday after a football game for the Syracuse Orange and for basketball. You could probably, if you're working in media, just open up the phone lines and listen to people complain about Scott Schaefer, Dino Babers, Paul Pasqualoni, Jim Boeheim, and him refusing to play man-to-man. So it's always Syracuse football or basketball, and then it goes away for a little bit. Like the sports kind of scatter a little bit for minor leagues. Albany, it's all over the place. Some days it's Yankees. Some days it's Jets. Some days it's Giants. Some days it's local if there's a certain athlete, a Kevin Herter or a Jimmer Fredette. So really more college-centric in Syracuse, more athlete and local-based in Albany when it comes to the sports scene.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, we've had, in the capital region recently, we've had some pretty big athletes hit it. Right?
Yeah, and across the sports, too, like not just basketball, like with Jimmer Fredette and Kevin Herter. You've got baseball guys, Matt Gage, right, just getting up there doing his Ian Anderson, the Anderson brothers from that side of it. Football, there's been a past of guys getting an opportunity to get a quick cup of coffee, whether it's like a Malachi Jones from the Albany Empire, Wade Hansen from Tamarack. Like, it's amazing to think about the capital region and products they've been able to produce across the pro scene.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So I read you're a certified voter for college football's Heisman Trophy and the College Football Hall of Fame. That's pretty cool.
It is.
How did that happen? What was the process?
It is awesome. I'm very proud of that. That was a career goal I set out for somebody who loves college football. I wanted to have that happen. I got to reach it. So this goes way back to 2014. I was working out in Syracuse, and there's a guy named Bud Poliquin who's like the longtime columnist, 35 years. I don't even know if these positions even exist anymore. Bud was the guy. And I was a producer for Bud and the Man-Child, their radio show. And I asked him, I said, Bud, how did you get your Heisman Trophy vote? He's like, yeah, I don't know. I've been doing it for like 30 years. I don't even remember. I guess they asked me to be the boss at this at one. I'm like, what do you mean they asked you to be the boss? And you said no. He's like, guys, if you just try to get it and you ask the right people, you'll get it. So I was like, that's really odd advice and not very helpful. But his advice was just find a contact, send him the stuff you're doing, and remind him. What people don't realize about the Heisman Trophy is that it's regionally based. So, for instance, like 3 voters in Albany, 3 voters in Buffalo, 3 voters in Syracuse. The reason they do that is, like, let's say, use the state of Alabama, for instance. Like, they don't want it to be too heavy Crimson Tide and not Auburn Tigers. In Ohio, they don't want it too Ohio State heavy and not another school. Right. So I kept emailing a certain person for a couple months and said, hey, here's my stuff. I represent Albany. They got back to me about 3 weeks before the trophy was coming out in 2015. They said, we got 2 openings. We can't promise you it's you. I was like, you know what? I'm in the mix. Then I get an email from Bud's old boss in Syracuse, a guy named Jason Murray, who's out in California. So because I had that contact, he remembered me through Bud And then all of a sudden one day my email says, congratulations, you're a Heisman Trophy voter. Here's the ballot.
Oh, wow.
So I've been voting since 2015. So it is really cool. I sign away everything. I can't talk about who I vote for during the year because they want to make sure the TV side gets their viewers. But it is amazing. I'm honored that they keep saying, you know what, we trust you with the Capital Region's vote. It's really cool. Yeah.
That is so cool. Is it a lifetime membership? I mean, once you're in, or?
So that's been the case. Like if you're working in media and covering the sport, it has been a lifetime vote. So you see people who vote for 25, 30, 35 years. I hope if they asked me how they should do it, hopefully I don't lose my vote saying this, but I think you should probably max it at 10 years because it's like the Hall of Fame for baseball or like the College Football Hall of Fame. Sometimes you just get new voices, new ways to view the sport. It gets a little stale if the same people are voting for the same thing. You already know what the result's going to be because they think a certain way and it's hard for people to change. So I would love to vote for it my entire life. If they asked me, I probably would say you probably should put a 10-year max on it. So I'm coming up on year 10. So maybe
20 years.
Maybe 20 years or, every year except post-Goz. They'll change those rules and let me have the lifetime vote. Yeah.
Right. I get it.
And I get to cover it every year in the city, too, because Albany's 2 hours away. So I go down and, see the whole thing, the athletes, the coaches. It's an awesome. And my dad comes with me. So it's a nice father-son experience, too, down in the city.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
And soon to be a father of 3 boys, so maybe the boys will be going on the trip with you at some point.
That's the hope. Mom is saying, you're not bringing my boys to New York City because I see them diving off the couch doing wrestling moves. I cannot imagine them in the streets of New York City with Grandpa. No, I think they have to wait till the 2034 Heisman before they're allowed in the city.
All right, that's fair enough. Yeah, you mentioned Bud Poliquin. It's funny. He wrote a big look back story on my Lemoyne baseball team and how I gave up the most infamous Grand Slam home run in the history of Lemoyne College, and we lost to Arkansas 6-5.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah. If we won the game, we go to Omaha. We go to the World Series. So that's how I know Bud Poliquin.
He's got an illustrious career. He's been at Jim Brown's house. He sat in a car with Bill Rush. He has these. So now you're on the list, though, of the illustrious Bud Poliquin columns, the Matt Sames Lemoyne Dolphin Grand Slam.
Yeah, great. Super proud of it. So in 2021, you started Goz Media. So tell me about that.
So as the world changed post-COVID, a lot of people in media had to adjust what they had to do as well. I was in one of those spots where I had to look and say, okay, I've been doing traditional media, radio, television, writing. It's time to pivot. What's the next part of my career? So I launched officially in March of 2021, and my focus is podcasts and then the video side as well. Sort of what we're doing here. Hey, but my focus was okay, I could do the sports side of it, which I did. I had another side I called it Goz on the Go, 30 minutes, all you need from the world of sports. But I really loved getting there with Goz, and Levack Goz was there too, and all different ones. But the getting there with Goz one was, we talked about careers and we talked to people who were influencers and people who were doing different things in community. I loved it because that flexibility of being so used to, okay, you got to be in the studio at this time. You've got to tape this interview at this time. The fun part about the medium, the non-traditional media, doing this is you can have some flexibility. You can do 4 podcasts and then post it in a month. You can do 3 videos and wait for a certain moment to happen. There's no, hey, you got to go to break in 90 seconds. You got to go to... You don't have that. The flexibility of non-traditional media, I loved doing it. I got to work my own schedule. My first one was born. So I got to spend the day with him, then do other stuff at night. Those were long days. But from doing traditional media my whole life to then working on your own schedule and getting to do what you want, creating your own content, it was a fun 2 years to do it. Stressful, fun, exciting, nerve-wracking. I'm sure that's what everyone does when they launch their own business. They go through all those feelings. I paid my paychecks with it, which is not easy to do for a media company. Didn't miss any bills. Wife was happy about that, and it worked. It was a cool 2 years doing that for sure.
Nice. All right. So you've been covering sports professionally for over 12 years?
Gosh, I sound so old. Should I have shaved my beard? Gosh, yes, over a decade, yes.
So just give me some examples of how things have changed.
So I always think about this term called stringer work, and probably people who are younger than you and I are going to hear the word stringer and be like, I don't even know what the word stringer means. So early in my career, I would do some stringer work, which would mean I'd go to the event. So let's use Syracuse for an example, right? Like the older media members would get to go to Syracuse basketball and football, and I would have to find anything else. Like, you're not going there, fresh kid out of Hobart. You got to go do something else. So I would go to like boxing at the Turning Stone Casino, and I'd get sound. I'd get interviews, and I'd say, hey, it's Goz here live from Turning Stone Casino. The fights are on the way. And I'd send back a 2 or 3 minute report, which sounds probably so old school to people. But now I would take out my phone, film where I am, say, hey, shoot a Facebook Live, shoot a Twitter video.
Sure.
That wasn't a thing when I started. I remember when I hosted my first radio show, they were like, hey, can we get some air checks of it? I was like, how do I pull it without having a tape recorder? Like, I'm at like the fringe, like that tail end of like social media about to blow up and finding it. So I remember like doing stringer reports, trying to pull audio, even like you mentioned the Red Wings and the Saltcats, like even those broadcasts, it was off like a website you had to pay $4 for the parents. And I know, this is a baseball guy, like some of your teammates from across the country. Now it's just listed on a website for watching this transformation of like, this is how it used to be till we're about to have a big boom in the industry. It's easier at times, but it also puts you under more pressure because you have more competition that everybody has the same form that you can go into. So exciting, pressure-filled, and always kind of hard to adjust, right? Like, because everyone's learning at the same pace of these new equipment and things start burping out. So, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a little crazy.
Yeah. Case in point, any idiot can have a microphone and some cameras.
These are nice microphones, though, and nice cameras. These are I've seen blurry videos. I've seen people like, the guys, Dan and Danny are going to go crazy. No, like, I've seen people screw this up. You guys are doing a nice job here. This is not idiot style.
Oh, no, this is actually a really nice studio.
Yeah.
Was Studios in Burnt Hills, New York. Little plug for Dan and Danny.
Yeah, I can't speak of the two people speaking in the microphones, but
no.
that we can't prevent.
No. So Super Bowl Media Week has always looked insane to me, and you've been to 4 of them. Tell me about that experience.
So Radio Row, Media Week, Opening Day, all the different terms they've called it. I can truly say, like, when I started wanting to be a broadcaster my entire life, this is the only job I wanted. This wasn't even in the picture, because when I was a kid growing up, and I'm sure you remember this as well, like, it used to just be maybe 50 or 100 journalists would just show up to practice, and like you just do like funny bits for like a late night talk. That's it. That was just like, here's a tape recorder. Now it's in football stadiums. I'll start with opening day, like that Monday, which is now like a concert and everything. The players are just walking around. So if you've got a cell phone, some guys still old school with the tape recorder, I could just bump into, I don't know, the second string running back for the Chiefs, or the third. Now Mahomes and Chris Jones and Kelsey have their own booths, and everyone's camping out for hours. But that Monday, you get to talk to the players who are going to play in the Super Bowl. And that Tuesday, you have a media party. And then when like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at Radio Row, if you're a radio station, you got to go. Like, you just have to experience once, because you'll just have a conversation where you'll just be sitting there and Kellen Winslow Sr. will just walk by, and you're in the middle of an interview with Frank Caliendo, and behind you, like, I don't know, Daniel Jones is eating Chick-fil-A. You're like, what is this, like Disney World for like fans of like, here's everybody's here. Right. And there was that old commercial in Sports Center where like you'd see, this is Sports Center, where they go in the cafeteria. And that's real life at Radio Row. So it is a wild experience. I never thought I'd even do something like this. It is, again, stressful because you're competing with all these markets, and there's some nastiness of trying to get the guests. But having those moments of, like this, having a conversation for 10 or 15 minutes with Hall of Famers and former players and comedians is the coolest stuff you can have. That's why you do it, because you're having those conversations. Like, there's moments where I'm like, okay, this feels like an I made it moment, where it's like, this is where everyone is. Everyone's here. It's New Orleans, February 2025. So we'll figure out what we have to do to get you down there.
Oh, yeah. People Uncorked on the road.
All research. Need to do it. Yes.
Love it.
Bourbon Street.
Love it. All right, well, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we'll sample some vino, because this is People Uncorked. And we'll Goz will share some personal insights on media coverage and how social media has changed the game and some other things. We'll be right back. And we're back. We're back with Tom Goslowski from Fox Sports here in the capital region of New York. You told me you like sweet wine?
I do. Do you want to know why I like sweet wine? I have a story behind it.
Well, sure.
So my wife and I are high school sweethearts. And there's a certain place where they say when you hear your family called the Olive Garden. When I was in high school, that was my place. As a 17-year-old, I thought I'd take my wife. And they don't do this anymore. But before the meals, they'd ask if you'd like a sample of wine. And me and my wife are like 18. We're like, one day when we turn 21 and they stop IDing us. And that wine was sweet Moscato. So that's a special place in my heart.
All right.
As a young Olive Garden free breadstick eater.
Cool. Cool. Well, we are sampling a Moscato from Italy.
Italy or the Olive Garden? Okay, Italy. Yeah, okay.
It's going to be a little light-bodied. And I get an F for my pouring skills. Here we go. There you go, brother.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for being on People Uncorked. That's sweet.
It's very sweet.
It's very sweet. It's not my bag.
No.
It's not my bag,
Immediately
man.
I saw that reaction. There was no hiding it from you. That's why these cameras are here. There's no line.
I think I just got diabetes. Jesus.
I'll take a second sip.
Oh, yeah. Good God. I think it's made by Hershey's. All right. All right. So how many corks do you give it?
I mean, this is my wheelhouse here. So, like, this is an 8 for me. If someone said, Goz, what type of wine would you like? The sweeter, the better for me. So, like, this is about as good as it can get.
All right,
The
cool.
only difference that would make it different is if we had free salad and breadsticks. That would have been a 10. So, this is an 8.
All right. Fair enough. It's tough for me to rate this.
Do you have another swig, maybe? Do you have another
I'll
sip,
do
maybe?
another swig,
maybe
sure.
They taught me in the Finger Lakes at Hobart, you got to sniff something or something with legs.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Again, not my type of wine, but I don't know, 4.7 corks.
Wow, I thought you were going 3. I think more sips, it's going to go down. 4, 7's fine.
Nope, nope, can't do another sip, actually. So, all right. All right. So what are your thoughts on athletes using social media to influence their bosses and like public perception and contract pressure and kind of using it as a weapon?
Weapon, tool, crutch. I've heard all those terms with people using that. Here's the thing with athletes using it like that. How aware are the bosses? Like, I always feel like, let's say you're a GM and maybe you're in your 60s and someone's got to explain what TikTok is, or someone's got to. So I feel like when they get the notice like that, then all of a sudden you're on the defensive. Like, why are they using this thing to do that? I wonder how often an agent tells the athlete, like, hey, we need a new contract. What's the best way to play the public in getting this? Or it's an athlete just going off the rails and the agent has to call them and say, can you take down the tweet? Can you everyone sees it. You have 100,000 followers. I wish I could give you a statement where it's like, oh, it always works or 80% of the time it works. It really is individual organization to organization. I would say pro athletes are probably more productive with it because of the following they have. If you're a 19-year-old kid who's a sophomore and you're not playing as much and you can play it on social, you're probably going to hit the transfer portal. You're probably not going to play more. And it seems like younger athlete, because they grew up with that, is far quicker because they're being criticized for the first time in their life to go to social. So I'd say pro athletes probably have a reason they're using it, and college athletes, for a blanket way to look at it, are more immature on how they use it.
Yep. Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny you brought up NIL. I wanted to talk to you about name, image, likeness, and the transfer portal and how they've transformed college sports. It's kind of taken money out of the shadows and put it on stage, front and center. What are your thoughts on it?
I am probably the biggest supporter of NIL you're going to find. Like, I am Mr. NIL. Here's why I was telling people about Mr. NIL. Because for what I do for a living, I support sponsors. Like, so just imagine me like going on the air and saying for 10 minutes, it's awful these kids are making money. How dare they pay these kids to make money off their name, image, and likeness? Hey, it's Goz, by the way, for Lily and David Fine Jewelers. You know what I mean? Like, I'm doing that every single day. So, like, the hypocrisy of me trying to say someone shouldn't make money off their name, image, and like this while I'm doing it for a living is just too ridiculous and too hypocritical. So, I'm all for it. I know a lot of people want to put a cap on it and say, well, they need a salary cap, they need this, they need that. That's kind of not how America works. Like, I've never heard of somebody saying, like, you can make so much money selling, or you can make so much money being a model or being an athlete. Well, it's unfair that you're that good looking or that good of a salesman or that good of an... No one says that, but the people who say that are the college presidents and ADs who don't want to pay the kids anymore. Well, we paid them. We don't want to pay them too much. I'm sure some people who do anything for a living hear that from their bosses. We do want to pay you, but just not as much as you think you should be worth. That's the fun, capitalism-free enterprise of college sports. If someone's willing to pay you that price, you sign it and say, okay, you're willing to pay. That's right. My market. So I'm very pro NIL. I'm glad it's happening. The transfer portal is a little bit more difficult to get a handle on still when we're talking about this, because it's great that like coaches and like we'll call it non-athlete students, you can go and play wherever you want. But at some point, is the portal really helping the athlete if they're playing at 4 schools in 4 different years? They actually do have to go to class. You know, that's the other part of it. It's like, hey, I have to be a student by May 1st of whatever, 2025. It would be nice if we can at least act like they have to go to school sometimes. I think people forget their semesters and trimester. So the portal, if there's still an education part of it, I can't really have to say that, but I think we do have to remind people that that part is still important. So I don't know what you do with the portal to limit it, as long as there has to be some crossover for education, but go NIL. I hope it continues to go on for D3, D2, D1 kids to whatever happens. If you can make money on your own, USA. That's America. You know what I mean?
America.
Yes. Cheers to America.
Cheers to America. All right, I'll give this one more swig here. I don't know.
4.9 now?
God, I think I'm stuck at 4.7.
Oh, gosh, all right.
It was funny. I remember the story about it was a lineman. He was a lineman from SMU in the early 80s. And he got drafted by the Dallas Cowboys. They said, how do you feel about being drafted by the Cowboys? He said, well, it's good and everything, but I'm gonna have to take a pay cut. Because they were literally paying the players with envelopes every week. They were on payroll.
It's incredible to think about. And we couldn't track it. Nobody knew. SMU obviously got caught, but like, how often was that going on? It's crazy. I mean, SMU getting good that fast, now it sort of makes sense, but to take a pay cut, crazy to think about that.
And Eric Dickerson's grandmother waking up with a sports car in her driveway with the keys on the dash. I mean, you know.
It wasn't Santa who dropped it off? We're not sure. The Easter Bunny?
Just fortuitous. Someone left their car there for him. So the Summer Olympics are happening as we speak. Is there anything in the Olympics that intrigues you or that you follow? Or
I don't know why I'm shouting at my wife so much. I must be in trouble, or I don't know what's going on. But like beach volleyball, she is locked in. She played at St. Rose. So like I'm waking up at like 7:30 and she's locked in on Cuba versus USA. So I've been watching a lot of beach volleyball. Of course, the basketball team, the Olympics and everything's going on with LeBron and that team. So I'm watching some basketball. Gymnastics made a lot of headlines. That was cool. The stuff that's going viral right now in 2024 has been women's rugby and table tennis. The women's rugby stuff is just like, I don't even know. Like, they're just like such teamwork involved and the rules, and people are trying to figure it out. Table tennis every year. Everyone thinks they can play, and then they watch the Olympics. They're like, that's not fair. Yeah. I didn't know we could hit it that hard. Right. So I'm all over the place with my stuff, but I'd say volleyball the most, and then the social media clips of women's rugby and table tennis have intrigued me. I want to watch more of that stuff.
All right. I follow the Hoopers. I think that's pretty interesting, and I can't wait for track and field.
Yes.
I think that's pretty, to watch human beings run that fast is insane.
Just think about that statement, right? Like the 100-meter dash, the fastest person ever. Like the history of the earth. We have no one who's ever been tracked. What a statement. I'm the fastest human being ever. Right. Incredible.
Yeah, pretty cool. So the Albany Firebirds almost won another arena football world championship this summer. You've seen the debacle of Antonio Brown's ownership versus the current ownership group. Any predictions going forward for the league, for the team? What are your thoughts?
There is such a support. They call themselves the Flock. The support of the Albany Firebird fan base, which I know it sounds so cliche, but it truly is so important. When you have a following, a group of people that want something for a community in a town that are willing to spend on season tickets and go to events and buy jerseys, that's the hardest part about it. There are so many colleges and pro teams that have everything else in place but don't have that because so many teams have been so brought into the market for decades. It's hard to find footing. It's hard to find that slice of pie in certain cities. Albany's so unique that they already have it. Like, you have a group of fans from the 90s that have stuck around to the 2020s that want to be a part of it. For the league itself, this goes back months ago, that when it initially launched, and I don't mind saying this because I work with the team president, Jeff Levack. Like, I said this to his face. I said, hey, man, remember when you guys announced, I'm talking the Arena Football League in general, like, hey, here's our 16 cities for the upcoming season. 8 of them were states. And I'm like, they know the difference between states and cities, right? Like, I know they're in Canada, but this isn't a city. This is a state. And then initially on that list, if you remember, Albany wasn't on it. So much change went through. I think they wanted to, the Arena Football League, make headlines, get a following, get talked about on social media, which is a huge part of this in 2024, that sometimes the things they pushed to finish weren't ready. And they learned that very quick. It's all public now. But now understanding the mistakes they made, almost like a freshman athlete, like, okay, can't run at that pace anymore. Can't handle the ball like that. Can't throw that pitch because the competition has been raised. I feel so much more confident about the league heading to 2025 than I did in 2024 because the mistakes were made. Sadly, they were public, but the mistakes were made, and you pick up the piece and say, all right, let's reset. Here's what we did right. Here's what we did wrong.
And they have a new commissioner, Jeff
Fisher.
Yeah, former NFL coach Jeff Fisher. It gives it some credence.
For sure.
Yeah. Cool. Well, nice segue. You brought up Levack. You have an entertaining dynamic with your partner, Jeff Levack. You guys have the local sports talk show, New York's Capital Region, for about 8 years with a little break in between. Maybe you can talk a little bit about the chemistry between you two. How did the show come together? How has it evolved?
So I was hired as Levack's producer. So I was hosting Morning Drive in Syracuse, my home market. I thought that would be my job for the rest of my life. Home market, wanted to host in Syracuse, thought this was it, good to go. And as you get older, you're like, okay, I've done this now. Maybe I can just look somewhere else. I have cousins who live in Guilderland, opening at 104.5 The Team, saw it happen. I got hired as Levack's producer. So it was his former co-host, Armin, and then Levack. And I know this is going to be so wild for some people. Like, the role of a producer and a host, there are times they talk, and there's times they don't, just because I'm cutting audio, he's prepping. We really didn't have the same relationship for about a year because he was working with the co-host, and I was doing behind-the-scenes stuff. Armin leaves. There's a lot that happened between when Armin left and the next guy they hired, which might have to be a follow-up podcast. I could do about 2 hours on that. But another co-host is hired. I'm still Levack's producer. I get hired as Levack's co-host in September of 2016, so about a year and a half after working with each other. And I remember our boss at the time, as we got ready to go to Houston in February of 26, he said, hey, the show will never be the same when you guys come back from Houston. And I never knew what he meant by that. He goes, you guys are about to spend 7 days together. The show's fine as it is now, but you're about to become friends, and what you guys talk about off the mic will be what happens on the mic. And there's always the cliche thing, but it's so true, I think, for our show, where it's like, if you listen to two guys at a bar in Albany, how would it sound and what would it look like? And I hope that people, when they listen to the show, are like, no, that is the closest you're ever going to find. It is two guys who like to drink, like to talk sports, like to bust each other's chops, like to talk about whatever's. And it happened at the Super Bowl because we were with each other for 8 straight days. And we became friends. And I think that moment of Houston of February 2016, if you listen to a show before that and after that, it's 2 different shows. So when we actually got to, go get chicken wings and go get beer and hang out at people's houses, and now you could feel the actual friendship on the air of like, wow, this is like me and my brothers or me and my friends talking about sports. So that evolution of producer to this is going to be a weird time here for the next couple months to I can't wait to get to the next spot with you. Hopefully people feel that on the air. And I think it's been successful since then.
Cool. What topics tend to resonate the best with listeners?
I would say there's always called the low-hanging fruit of like who's the best. Like, the GOAT conversation can always hit a nerve with somebody because it's always generational. It's you grew up in the 90s, the 2010s, the 1970s. So many people get so defensive about what they grew up with. Like when you view the world as an 8-year-old compared to an 18-year-old and a 28-year-old, for whatever reason, maybe it's actual like the size of what you are or your lack of anything else you've ever seen. So many people are so inclined to defend what they saw at 8. So those things always hit. It's almost like you can't press the button unless you need to, because if you play it too often, people are going to know what you're doing. But those always work well. Maybe this is more about society, but usually when things go poorly, like a Monday after a bad Jets, Giants, or Yankee game, we'll probably respond via social media or phone calls more than they beat the White Sox 5-2. Sometimes the negativity of this coach is an idiot or this player needs to go resonates more, at least in the sports talk world, than all right, they're 11-0. Yeah, what else do people are just satisfied, but people like to complain. I found that out. People like to complain and like to argue, and those things resonate the most.
Sure. Have you ever had an interview that just went horribly wrong?
Oh, yeah. So my worst interview of all time. This goes back to the score 12-60 in Syracuse. So the late Rolly Massimino, you might remember him from Villanova. Won the national championship. So
he autographed my forehead in Roman's bar one night.
What?
True story.
I have so many follow-ups to that. Go ahead. I want to hear the story first. Actually,
I mean, it's pretty. I may or may not have had 15 beers at the time, and he had a Sharpie. I said, "Hey, right here, Raleigh," and he hit me.
So Raleigh or Rolly, like depending on what you do with that O, like sometimes I think in my mind I have a Syracuse accent where I'll stretch the A and the O. So out of the gates, I said his name, and he must have heard it and got mad how I said it. But what people don't remember is that after that career at Villanova, he went to Division III basketball. So you've got a guy who won a national championship at a Division I program on a national stage, one of the great upsets in college basketball history. He was one of those coaches who couldn't turn it off. So he's coaching in Florida, Division III basketball. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to book him at Syracuse Villanova week. I had him on at like 7 o'clock in the morning or 8 o'clock. Some ridiculous time for an 80-year-old man you would think would be up at that point, but it's a little annoyed. So out of the gates, my producer, Josh, was like, no. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, he is so mad right now, and you have no chance. I'm like, no, we're going to be fine. We weren't fine. So initially, he didn't like how I said his name, and then I just threw a softball like, hey, Jim Boeheim and you had a lot of battles back in the Big East. Do you have any great memories of going up against Coach Boeheim? No. And that was it. I'm just like, oh, my gosh. I have it out there somewhere. I had booked him for like 12 minutes. I had to wrap him after 4 minutes.
Oh.
Like, couldn't remember players' names on Villanova. I think he thought I was going to put him on the defensive because he was in the Syracuse market. Like, no. It was horrible. To this day, will get 9-10 years later, we'll get message about Rolly Massimino, Villanova basketball, and Torrey Holt. If you remember him, he played for the Rams, should be in the Hall of Fame. Torrey Holt, same thing as NC State Syracuse week. Could not have been nicer. 10-minute interview, fantastic guy. He was doing it in his car, so he'd be given an answer, turn left in 200 feet. Campus is on the right. And people are like, are you going to tell Torrey Holt to turn off his GPS? I'm like, no, I'm not going to tell a Hall of Fame wide receiver that I could hear him on his GPS. So those happened within the span of like 2 months. Torrey Holt was great. The late Raleigh Massimino, not so much.
Who's maybe one of the best interviews you've ever had?
Scott Hansen from the NFL Red Zone. If you watch the Red Zone channel every Sunday at 1 o'clock, Scott Hansen walked on at Syracuse. He has done the Red Zone channel for about 10 plus years now. But what's great about Scott Hansen is not only is he just a nice guy and will follow up and have a conversation and be engaging, he is always nice on social media, he is so engaged in the conversation. People don't believe this when I says he will ask about your fantasy football team and then remember the conversation 3 months later and be like, so you took McCaffrey second? How did you get him second? He'll remember it.
Wow.
And it's like, if you know somebody who's like sharing your content, being personable, calling you Levack Goz on the air, like I had a conversation with Scott Hansen in 2023 where I was like, hey, we love having him on before the season kicks off. We couldn't do it. He personally reached out and said, hey, you tell Levack and Goz whenever they want back on the show, let me know and I'll remember. Like nobody does that. Nobody does stuff like that. And he doesn't have to do that stuff. So it's the stuff like behind the scenes where he gets no credit, not public. Scott Hansen's my guy. That's my favorite person. I hope, again, every once a year get to interview him because he's that great.
He's great, man. I love NFL Red Zone. I have three screens in my basement bar, and I've got Red Zone in the middle. I've got both games going on over here. Yeah, he's really good. So you're a married father of 2 boys. You're expecting son number 3.
Yes.
Pretty soon. Being a parent changes a lot of things. What's changed for you?
Oh, gosh. You know what? Wine quickly. I would say, I think.
Oh, I'm still at 4.7.
I would say, and hopefully this speaks for everybody who's a parent, like the responsibilities and goals in your life change when you have someone else to deal with and talk to and take care of and work with every single day, because there might be people, I don't want to say I'm less ambitious than when I was 20, but the focus of what my career decisions are going to be are far different as a parent and soon to be parent of 3 than they were when I didn't have a kid and when I wasn't married. Like there's a part of my career where I interviewed with a bunch of different, even when I was here in Albany, like I interviewed with a bunch of different cities and I had the conversations and I was like, would this work? Is this somewhere I'd want to move to? I remember there was one city in particular, like I was in the hotel room. My wife was going to go to that city, like signed a contract. And I was like, I can do that when I'm 27. I really need to have much longer conversations when I'm 34, 35. Like we'll talk about like shifts, right? Like I work at the afternoon drive. If I worked in the morning drive, which is a lot of the morning show hosts, like that's prime real estate. Do I want to get up at 3 o'clock in the morning and not see my kids until, I don't know. Do I want to work 6 to midnight like people in television who their kids are in school and then they don't? Like TV people go through that. If I'm a writer or a play-by-play broadcaster, I thought at one point I wanted to be a play-by-play broadcaster because sports talk was in a weird spot. Do I want to go on the road for 8 hours and every Saturday and Sunday? I don't want to pull back on what I'm doing, but there's certain responsibilities where it's like, okay, you're a father first, you're a husband first. Are these the decisions you want to make in your career? So those things have factored in so much more in the decisions that I make to what I do now. Like even the decision to go from non-traditional media to non-traditional media back to traditional media. Like my family played a huge decision in that. Like I could have been home with my oldest forever and did my own hours, did my own thing. But you know this, and other people in the media know this, like if you're selling for yourself, it'd be nice to say every client's going to pay you on the 15th and the 30th. That doesn't happen. That's not the real world. But you do have bills due on the 15th and the 30th. It's nice to have a consistent paycheck when you're about to be a father of 3 compared to, well, maybe I'll be. So those things play a huge factor in what's going on. So I think if anybody's a young broadcaster, I hope they have those conversations when they're 18 and 19 and not 28 and 29. Like, I knew at some point in my life I wanted to have kids, and I knew that was going to happen, but I'm very happy I'm in the sports talk radio program director field because those decisions and those big life moments would have been a lot more difficult if we didn't have those far earlier in the relationship. That was a deep answer, wasn't it?
That was a good.
All right, I'm going to have another drink of wine.
So before we wrap, is there anything else you want to share with people?
I'm the 3rd. My middle name's Paul. My wife might have been intoxicated during our engagement. No, listen to Levack and Goz weekdays 3 to 6 on Fox Sports Radio 95.9 and 980. Yeah, and thank you for having me on this podcast. I hope this isn't the last time. I hope I can just like hang out on the couch for another episode. Just finish this wine if you're not gonna.
Yeah, and
this will be the last time.
And per your request, next time clothing optional.
Yes, that's right.
I thought first time out maybe we'd just play it straight. But
We're looking for those views. Matt Sames and Goz After Dark, 2:00. We'll do that in the future. Thank you for having me.
Oh, Tom Goslowski, thanks for being on People Uncorked. Cheers.
Cheers, my friend.
Thanks, buddy. Salute.